Who says that concrete is only for construction projects? In this one, I'm going to show you how to make these really simple concrete cone ring holders. Before we even start messing with any concrete, we first need to think about what am we going to use to make a mould. Now I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I opted to use regular printer paper. I chose this because it rolls into a cone really easily, and when it is in a cone shape, I think it should be stiff enough to be able to support the concrete. I was a little bit worried about the concrete sticking to the paper though, so to try and prevent that, I also used greaseproof paper. So I secured some greaseproof paper to the printer paper with some painter's tape. I could then roll it into a cone shape and secure it together with some more painter's tape. I wanted to try 3 different sizes to the cones to see how it would affect the concrete. So I made a shorter, fatter cone, I made a medium cone, and I also made a taller, thinner cone that had got a really sharp taper to it. I wasn't too confident with how the concrete would set in this one, but I thought I'd give it a go anyway. Once the cones were secured, I turned my attention to the bottoms. I needed to make sure that the concrete wouldn't run out, so I added more painter's tape and a blob of hot glue. That should stop the concrete from leaking. So we've got the cones made, but before we can mix any concrete, we need to think about how we're going to hold the cones up when we pour the concrete inside. I kept this really simple again. I opted to use a cardboard toilet roll tube and a couple of plastic bottles. The cones should sit nicely in the tube and in the bottles as well. They're not the most stable thing in the world, but they should do the job nicely. Right, so we've got the cones done and we've got something for them to stand in while we pour the concrete. Now we can mix the concrete. For this application, I opted to use ready mixed quick setting concrete. This means I don't have to worry about adding any sand or any aggregate. All I need to add is water. Now this quick setting concrete does set really quickly, but it can still take a few days for it to fully dry, so do keep that in mind. To mix the concrete, I used an old takeaway container, a plastic yoghurt pot to act as a scoop, and an old spoon that I didn't worry about getting concrete on. Now concrete can irritate the skin, so please make sure you wear gloves if you give this a go for yourself. Now there are mixing instructions on the bag of concrete that tells you how much water to add, but for this one I mixed it by eye and by feel. I think the mix needs to be closer to a soup consistency rather than your traditional concrete mix. By mixing it to a soup consistency, it should be easier to pour, it should get down to the bottom of the cones, and it should make it easier for any trapped air bubbles to be released. So once it was mixed to a consistency I was happy with, I could pour it into the moulds. Once I'd poured it into the moulds, I made sure to tap them down a few times. This should help force the concrete down to the bottom of the cones, and it should release any trapped air pockets. Now it's just a case of leaving them to set. Now it does set really quickly, but to be on the safe side, I left them for 3 hours before I removed the paper. Luckily, the greaseproof did do a good job at not sticking to the concrete, so I'm glad I added that. On the skinnier cone, it must have folded in on itself because it got caught inside the concrete mix itself. So this one is kind of ruined, to be honest, but I thought I'd persevere with it and I can use this as a bit of a practice one. I left these for 3 days to fully dry, and over those 3 days I noticed that they developed kind of a white powder on the outside of them, and I had to use Google to try and find out what this was, and the best that I could come up with was that this is salt that has either been in the water or in the concrete mix itself, and as the water's evaporated it's dried on the outside, leaving the white powder. So to get rid of it, I just wiped it off with a dry cloth. Now in the process of doing this, the skinnier cone that had got the greaseproof paper stuck inside ended up snapping on me. I snapped the top off. I kind of thought this would happen because it is quite a sharp taper and concrete can get quite brittle at these sizes, but again, I wasn't too worried about it. I thought it was already ruined with the greaseproof paper stuck inside. To seal the concrete, I opted to use a clear spray lacquer, so I gave them all one coat of lacquer, and hopefully this should seal them nicely and prevent any of that white powder forming again. Once the lacquer was dry, I can turn my attention to paint. Now I thought I got 3 cones, so I'll try 3 different paints. Now I have seen people paint really sharp geometric patterns onto these cones and it looks amazing, but I thought I'd try something a little bit different with this one. I wanted to try a bit of a paint drip effect. So to achieve this, I literally dipped the cone into the paint directly. I got rid of as much of the excess paint as I could, and then I turned the cone upright and allowed the paint to run down. With the first 2 cones, I dipped them and removed as much paint as I could and then allowed it to drip down. But for the 3rd cone, the skinnier one that I broke and the one that's got the greaseproof paper stuck inside, I thought I'd try something a little bit different, so I dipped it, but then I also added more paint on top to try and exaggerate the paint drip. Now it's just a case of leaving the paint to dry, and once the paint is dry, that's the concrete cone ring holders done. I'm really pleased with how these turned out. They're actually quite eye-catching, especially with that paint drip effect. Of course you could go with any kind of style that you like, use any colours, paint any kind of patterns you like on there, really go to town and make them your own. These are my ideal for putting your rings on, small bracelets and even watches too. So they make a great addition to a bedside table or a dressing table. I really hope you like this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you leave a comment down below and let me know how you would decorate these. I went with the paint drip pattern and I know that's not to everyone's taste, so do let me know in the comments what you would do to decorate these. If you've not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you click the subscribe button and click the little bell icon next to it. That way you'll get a notification as soon as we upload a new video. Thank you all for watching.